Do you have any idea how many successful entrepreneurs who've had what other people would classify as setbacks? Car accidents, infertility, immigration, addiction. The list goes on and on. Any idea how many successful entrepreneurs have turned those things into an unfair advantage? This is the unfair advantage. Turning life's challenges into your secret weapon for success. Life throws curveballs. They're not setbacks, they're setups for success. We dive deep into the lives of amazing entrepreneurs who've embraced their struggles, turned them into strengths, and built kick-ass businesses. And it's not about dwelling on past mistakes, it's about moving forward, building resilience, and creating success despite all the odds. Before we jump into these incredible stories, a big shout out to Brad's agency, ScreamingCow.com, where we turn dreams into digital realities. Let's do this. This is the Unfair Advantage. And now your host, Brad Starnes.
And we're back with another episode of The Unfair Advantage. I am your host, Brad Starnes. Today I'm excited to be joined by Dr. AJ Mellott, who is the founder of Ronawk and Stella Sciences. I met AJ several years ago when we were both in a accelerator program at UMKC, and our friendship has continued to flourish from there. AJ has an impressive background where he completed his PhD at the University of Kansas, Rock Chalk, where he was a graduate teaching assistant and researcher for 7 years before he transitioned to being a research assistant professor at the University of Kansas. AJ then reformed his current venture in February of 2019, which is aimed to develop technology to help treat diseases like cancer while also cutting down the cost, labor, and time it takes to grow patient cells. Today, we'll be talking about AJ's background in academics and also being a person of the LGBT community and how that has helped set him up for success in his business. But before we dive in, let's not forget that today's podcast is sponsored by Screaming Cow Marketing Group, which is a full-service marketing agency aimed at helping your service-based business grow and amplify your lead generation. If your business is looking for more work to do, you can call the guys who move. AJ, welcome on.
Thanks, Brad. And that was a really impressive intro. Thank you. I like that. And it has been, it's been a number of years we've known each other, which is pretty cool. So I'm pretty honored to be on your podcast today. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's, I guess that was back 2019?
2019. Yeah.
2019, yes.
When we first met. So
yes,
baby entrepreneurs.
Yes. That was had my last business. Anybody's listening, you've heard of it. And at the time, so when we closed down, the business name was Splitsy, and that's what we ran with and everything. But I think when you and I met, it was either Cover It or Divvy Up or something along those lines. It went through a few different iterations.
Remember Divvy Up, and we had talked about several different names back in that accelerator.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been it was during that when I built your guys' first website.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of ironic. It was the bookends of that business for me is when I built your guys' first site, and then when that business closed up is whenever I built your guys' new website that you're using right now. So
well, it was neat because when you started that first website for us, I remember we launched it, and the next day we had our first trade show as kind of a way to promote it. And from that moment, there are so many things that happened that I can trace back to basically that 24-hour period of the website going live and the trade show that had just propelled us to where we are today. So it's been really cool to see what's happened both with Ronawk, but then you, as you have emerged as an entrepreneur and gone through all these iterations, and just, entrepreneurship's a journey. There's not really an end goal. It's you're always learning and improving and building relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would, in just a second, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of give your background and everything like that. But for anybody who's listening, the type of person that AJ is I closed down my last business, and I had sent out an email to a few people who were like closest to me, who were mentors of mine, friends of mine. And at the time, AJ was already kind of thinking in the back of his mind, he needed to have the website redone, all that stuff. And so in a moment when I was down and felt like that I was at my lowest, it actually was kind of, in a way, I'd say almost the catapult for me to go into my agency full time as quickly as I did after I closed that business. AJ asked me to go out for coffee, and I'm just thinking we're going to catch up and this and that, which is absolutely what we did. And then in that conversation is when he mentioned this huge project that we worked on together. And so that's just the type of person that he is. He's always looking out for everybody else that's around him. And so what you see is what you get with him. Like there is no different versions of AJ whenever you're talking and working with them. So enough on that. AJ, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of your background, how you got into what you're doing and everything like that.
Yeah, so thanks. I guess, it starts back when I was young. I'd always kind of been a problem solver, so it was natural that I'd become a bioengineer. My mom is a nurse. My dad started off as an electrical engineer, so I kind of had those two mindsets growing up, and
Okay.
they were both really good at helping foster to solve problems. And I got a lot of exposure from my mom to the medical world, so I just really wanted to help people. Attempted to go to medical school after undergrad, and that really didn't work out. But I found a passion in graduate school and got into a great program where I got to work with stem cells and do tissue engineering. And I got to work on this problem where I was able to essentially turn these stem cells into the type of cells that facilitate the hearing in your inner ear. And it was in that moment of working on that project that I became very frustrated because I had to grow billions of cells, which was a very laborious task. And in my frustration, I thought to myself, there's got to be an easier way to do this. I know there are literally tens of thousands of people around the world that have to do this for various research labs, medical labs, pharma labs. And that would be the moment that would end up leading to where we are today, but it would catapult into the ideas that would become the core technology of Ronawk. And it really just started with the how can I make it easier and more natural to cultivate human cells, whether they're stem cells or whether they are adult cells from other tissues, so that we can use these cells for longer, we can maintain them, they're more therapeutic. And even though I went on to have a faculty position for 5 years, um, my heart really remained with this project. And so, as Brad mentioned, I had started Ronawk initially, but it was a challenge to kind of manage it with my faculty position. And then my current co-founder, Heather Decker, um, she was also part of academia, and she decided she was interested in a career change. And so she left at the end of 2018, and that gave us the opportunity to then actually form a venture together, resurrect Ronawk. And as Brad said, we were an accelerator together. In 2019, we learned a lot, and then things grew so fast that in 2020, I was actually able to step away from academia and start building this life sciences company in Kansas City. And we've been very fortunate to have the support of a lot of great people around us. Brad has been phenomenal, not only building our websites, but helping with leads and a whole bunch of background things people don't get to see. And, when Heather and I formed the company, the goal really was that we wanted to help people by developing technologies to accelerate next generation therapies. But also part of that, Heather and I really like to teach and engage with the community. Science is more than just about solving problems. There's this broader impact of how do we use this knowledge to benefit the public. And so with her and I, we try to work as much as we are able to with the public and go do talks and educational events. Though I will admit, and Brad has seen this, as the company has grown, our time has become more limited than that. But that's still a big passion of ours. We just have to be more selective now. But it's all about kind of injecting as much good into the world that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that you had said at the beginning of there was that you had wanted to go to medical school, and it
Hmm.
sounded like you couldn't get into medical school for whatever reason it was on their end and everything like that. And I'm sure at the time was heart-wrenching in a way for you to like not have that opportunity. You had your heart and soul and dream was to do
Yeah.
that. But like looking back, it's like there was some sort of greater plan and purpose in
Yeah.
place. Because obviously, if you would have gone off to medical school, possibly like the organization you have and the path you've gone wouldn't have possibly happened if it wasn't for that.
Yeah, that's completely true. So I'm very thankful. I don't know if Ronawk would be around today, or it might have come at a much later point, but it would have certainly been a very different path. And I'm very glad with the path that life put in front of me. You're right, it was heart-wrenching at the time, but as I look back, I'm like, wow, I've gotten to meet so many people and do so much more immediately with this than I ever could have dreamed. And that part has been very, very rewarding. So I'm very glad
Yeah.
things occurred in the way in which they did.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about stem cells. So I've gotten to the point working with
Hmm.
you guys that I have I would even say a great idea. I have a very good idea of what they are and everything like
Hmm.
that. Like I wear this patch on the back of my neck that I guess does like phototherapy type
Hmm.
stuff, and I guess your body emits light, and it basically sends like that light back into your body to like reactivate or regenerate your
Hmm.
stem cells and all of that stuff. And it's like people who hear that, they're probably like, what is this? Or like they hear about it and they see, all these things online, on TV, whatever.
Hmm.
But it's probably best to be just kind of educated as to what they are and like how our body uses them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in the past, there's been a lot of controversy because there's a lot of misinformation out there. But the basic way I would describe stem cells, and there's different tiers, but essentially, your body has these cells that are in all these different tissues, and you can think of them as like maintenance cells. They're there for when you need them, and they have the ability to tell other cells around them how to behave, how to repair. Depending on the type of stem cell, they can actually differentiate, which means if you think of a stem cell kind of as a blank slate, it can turn into the cell that is needed to repair a tissue. So, like, for example, I'm oversimplifying, but if you're healing a wound and you need a skin cell, that stem cell can turn into a skin cell on demand to help out. But we can collect these stem cells from different tissues generally. So, like your fat tissue that, might accumulate around your belly. The bone marrow is another really good one. Um, we can get them from discarded umbilical cords. So after the umbilical cord has been removed from both the born child and the mother, it's usually just discarded in the
Mm-hmm.
trash. Well, we can actually procure stem cells from there, and then we can even get them from what's called the dental pulp of your teeth. So, um, there's a lot of different sources, but we can use these cells really in medicinal ways to help regenerate and rejuvenate tissues. In some cases, do repair. I primarily work with what are called mesenchymal stem cells. Those are adult stem cells from the tissues I mentioned. But there's other types of stem cells out there that can do more. Uh, but in overall, I like to think of them really as these medicinal cells in our body that are ultimately helping repair and helping us.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, isn't there a point in time in somebody's life and when essentially their stem cells in their body are either don't exist or pretty close to being non-existent?
It's a ratio over time. So as you get older, your body produces few, and there's fewer available because as I I don't know that I would say there's quite a limited supply, but the generation slows down.
Okay.
And as you get older and your body is maintaining itself, or say fighting cancer and whatnot, it has to use those up, and you reach a point where your body is using up more stem cells than it's making, and that is one of many factors that contributes to aging. And once again, I'm oversimplifying it, but those stem cells help with maintaining our body and slowing down the aging process.
Yeah. Well, I think this is probably the best opportunity to oversimplify things because, like, I always get to a point
Hmm.
where I'm like, I get very passionate about what we do, and it's like my wife
Hmm.
calls it mansplaining, and so it's like a lot of times you do that when you're passionate about something, and so a lot of
Hmm.
times you'll meet people, especially engineers in the medical industry, all that, where you're trying to explain something. It's like going over people's head. And I was only able to learn as much as I did because you were so kind and graceful with how you explained it and everything to me whenever we began
Hmm.
working together. So with like current practices, like a lot of times you hear
Hmm.
things where if they're trying to develop a new drug or therapy or something along those lines,
Hmm.
typically it is tested in things like mice, that
Hmm.
type of stuff. But with
Yep.
the BioBlock technology that you guys have, it kind
Hmm.
of, in a way, and I'm going to throw this out there hoping I'm right, it like in a way avoids having to test it in a environment like mice because you can basically mimic the environment in which these cells grow in the human body in your guys's
Yeah,
technology, right?
that's a pretty good description. You're pretty close. I'll tweak it just a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, and great job on that. Our bioblocks are these hydrogels, which most people, if you looked at them, would say, "Oh, it looks like a piece of Jello." That's exactly what it looks like, and the consistency is similar. But what's important about that is with that particular material, we can both shape it and tune it so that the mechanical features, so think about like how stiff the surface is, or how elastic it is, we can mimic different tissues in the body. And the reason that's important is when we then cultivate cells within the bioblock, they're more healthy, more viable. They maintain the characteristics of whatever tissue it is that we are trying to replicate. And so, excuse me, where we're trying to get them one day is that, let's say you go in to your doctor and you need to have a procedure done, and they need to either extract some cells for you to generate some stem cells for a procedure. Well, instead of doing it in mice, we could use your own cells, pending FDA approval and all that, where we could grow them in the blocks, and then the scientists and the clinicians can study them outside the body to make sure, yep, they're doing what we need, they're good quality, we can use them to treat whatever the thing is we need to treat, and then put them back in you. So one of my biggest goals for the technology one day is related to cancer, as Brad mentioned earlier, and this would be an idea where, maybe when we do a biopsy and say like a skin cancer, a lot of that goes to pathology to be processed. But if we could take a small piece of that, grow it in the bioblock that is tailored to mimic skin, then we could potentially continue growing, say, that cancer, that tumor, for the purpose of learning how it's going to mutate and maybe being able to try a variety, screen different therapies on it first to know which one's going to be most effective for that particular patient before any therapy is actually tried. So that way, the best therapy that's going to be most effective for the patient is tried the first time and then has the highest likelihood of working. So that's just an example of where we're aiming for with the BioBlock technology.
Okay. This is going to be a weird analogy in comparison, but it's like
Hmm.
a lot of times people use like AI and all that to kind of like predict the outcome of
Hmm.
games or whatever. It's like you
Hmm.
guys are kind of in a way developing your own AI with your BioBlock technology to predict kind of like, hey, if we do this type of treatment or that type of treatment, here's going to be exactly what's going to, or what we think is
Yep.
close to exactly what's going to happen with that. So,
Yeah, that's a great way to think of it. I would say, spiritually, we're like AI in that sense, but for biology, where we're working towards what's known as personalized medicine, so that we can predict the outcome for an individual. But what the way I would relate this to AI or machine learning is we're using a data set from the patient that we're trying to treat from the beginning. So that way
Okay.
it's closest and most predictable for that
Yeah.
particular patient.
Okay. And then, so one of the things that I find is interesting is like when you're testing different therapies and everything like that, like one of the things that can't be done, like unlike humans, you don't have mice that are different races and that kind of stuff. And it's like when you're
Mhm.
trying to basically test these therapeutics and everything, you're basically like going into it with I I'm gonna say like a blind eye in the sense that like you don't know how this is going to react until you do clinical trials and those different things based off of the person. But it sounds
Mhm.
like eventually you might get to a point where like you could test my wife does a lot with like breast cancer and everything like that. And so it sounds like eventually you get to a point where it's like you could hypothetically test like the comparison of like a healthy uh, tissue for a white female with a cancerous um, breast tissue for a African American female or vice versa, and be able to see how things would interact based off that because of this technology.
Yes, that's exactly right. It allows us to do a lot of combinations. And typically what happens, let's take, some generic drug, for example, in a clinical trial, you'll have a defined patient population, and you're trying to make the population as big as you can to get as much biodiversity as you can.
Hmm.
But um, what ends up happening is with that data, you end up getting an average, and you get ranges of how well the particular therapeutic is going to work. Whereas in this case, we can increase the resolution, zoom in and know, get really specific down to the patient or a subpopulation and know, for example, this target may work really well in one subpopulation of individuals,
Okay.
but is not anywhere near as effective in the other. And so then maybe we can learn how to make tweaks so that we know that if there's flavor A and flavor B of the same therapeutic,
Hmm.
flavor A works for one subpopulation most effectively, and flavor B works for the other population equally
Okay.
or similarly effective.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, this is I've I've spent years now talking with you and working through
Mhm.
you, working with you. So thankfully I'm able to help kind of like navigate the conversation and everything in an area that's
Mhm.
not necessarily my domain, but I would say that I would be
Mhm.
the wrong marketing partner to work with if I at least didn't know baseline of what was going on with your organization and everything like that.
Mhm.
So want to talk about like the concept of like the unfair advantage of the podcast and
Mhm.
everything, going from being in academics to then running this company,
Mhm.
especially with how fast it happened.
Yeah.
A lot of people look at it and say like, oh, that this person, had a advantage because they were, a exec of some organization. They're used to
Mhm.
managing and leading people, or blah 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 blah
Mhm.
blah, whatever reason it is in the world that so somebody says why you had an advantage. Um,
Mhm.
but I imagine that transition from being at the university to now growing this company was a
Mhm.
huge shift and everything like that. So I want to hear a little bit about how all that took place and what you went through with that.
Yeah. So interestingly, it was and it was not a gigantic shift. So to me,
Okay.
I think maybe the um, touching on my unfair advantage is that I don't think most people realize when I went into academia and as a faculty member setting up a research program and running my own lab, there was a lot of skills I acquired that were transferable to running a business. So I kind of feel like while I was in academia, I was getting my first entrepreneurial training, but maybe with some guardrails because I had to go out and get money under the rules of
Hmm.
how academics and grant funding works. And then I had to maintain the lab. I had budgeting. I had account reconciliation. I had regulatory, inventory. I had all the administrative and business components
Yeah.
that I had to do routinely while I was running a lab. And so when I made the transition, at least from the administrative part, those day-to-day operations, I had some experience and organizational skills in, and so those weren't, I think, near as hard, and that was really advantageous. What I did learn, and maybe what was more of the shift, is in academia, things are fairly insular, and when your main way to market is essentially publishing a paper, and then really you're only talking with colleagues that are not just in your field, but maybe even in the specialty field that's a subfield of the field you're in. So it's all
Okay.
very specific. And when it comes to business, even though we still have that specialty, all of a sudden you're looking more external, things are broad, you're dealing with the public,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a different mindset. So that was an interesting thing to learn. And you also are engaging with people that have different levels of exposure and understanding to the science and what you're doing. So just being able to adapt to all those different perspectives to communicate
Yeah.
your value proposition.
Okay. Yeah. And I imagine things move a lot slower in the university world than they do in the world of entrepreneurship and all of that.
Yes, they do. When you compare the two, yes, there's things can happen much faster, but that's because for right or wrong, there's a variety of different regulations at both the federal, state, and local level, and so having to adhere to those, not necessarily bad, just um, sometimes you are waiting on someone else to give the stamp of approval before the next event can happen.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So you made that transition. I guess you'd said in 2020, correct?
Hmm. Yes.
So obviously, beginning of 2020, we have the pandemic and everything like that.
Yep.
Um, did that help, or did that hurt, or yeah, did it help or hurt that transition?
Um, I don't know that it hurt. So because of our particular industry, I think it was a blessing in disguise,
Okay.
in the sense that there were a lot of not layoffs, but a lot of freezing of operations during COVID because of all the safety concerns. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was able to keep working in the business. And what was great that how Heather and I got through that, because the world was in this weird sort of pause moment. Um, we fortunately had a lot of the equipment with us um, for making our technology, but we were able to outsource that and provide services to other people that otherwise couldn't work in their labs because of safety protocols. So during COVID, we were able to provide these research services to keep the lights on, but to stay afloat and keep the business moving forward while we worked on the technology. So that was one thing that I think definitely worked to our advantage. And um, the timing was helpful. It was just a weird time. Looking back on it, I'd say we were pretty lucky, but it was very confusing during that time.
Yeah.
And I know Heather and I had several moments where we thought, "Oh no, what did we just do? And did we make the right call?" And we start this business, and then this global pandemic
Yep.
occurs.
Yeah,
So,
it seems to be a common theme, and then that's why I had to bring it up. Is that like the
hmm
pandemic was there was a silver lining in the pandemic for a lot of entrepreneurs and their
hmm
businesses. This one guy that um I interviewed, he was basically capped out in his role in corporate America, and
hmm
basically the pandemic hit. I think he said he was laid off from his job, or just like he was trying to
hmm
find something to do because you're trapped at home. And he like built like a new deck, and then built like this play set for his kids and everything. And everybody's like, man, you did a really good job in this. Like, you should just like, well, why don't you come over and build a deck for me and build a deck for me? And then next thing he knows, he's running this company building decks for like making a crap ton of money each year. And he's like, like it sucks that the pandemic happened, but he's like, if it didn't happen, I wouldn't have had this opportunity wouldn't have came about. And it
Yep.
it sounds like that some of the early idea of the sister companies Stella kind of came out of
Hmm.
this because you guys were able to provide those services and everything.
Yeah, so that's exactly, and we knew that providing those services was a great way to generate revenue. So
Hmm.
when Ronawk reached a new inflection point and we had to move to a bigger lab, we decided then to set up the second business where, because we were acquiring some more capital equipment, um, while we were working on the main technology and selling our product, we thought, you know what, there's a portion of time where the equipment we're using is, just sitting there. So we want to make sure that we are outsourcing that equipment to help others to bring in another stream of revenue and doing it under the umbrella of Stella. But the other
Yeah.
reason we set that up was there's a lot of backlog since the pandemic. And so this is a way, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that don't have access to some of the capital equipment needed, at least in the life sciences space. And so this was a
Okay.
way we could help other entrepreneurs and friends and colleagues that have their own really unique business ideas to be able to contract a lab locally to get the data they need for as they go to pitch to investors.
Okay. Okay. So I want to, I guess, slightly transition
Yeah.
a little bit. So one of the things that I love highlighting is like some things that people don't necessarily like you can't see, but
Hmm.
are like in my case, I have a stutter, and so a lot of times people can't see
Hmm.
that unless like my face freezes up or I'm like lockjawed or
Hmm.
whatever, and then like when I'm on Zoom or recording like this, I can
Hmm.
make a joke and say it's the internet or whatever. But in
Hmm.
person, I can't do that. But a lot of times people can't see that what some people would call a disability for me,
Hmm.
that has actually become a lot of like my unfair advantage. It's why I began the
Hmm.
podcast, this and that. And you and I have talked a lot about you being in the LGBT community and how
Hmm.
important it is to have a like support system and everything that I
Hmm.
was going through with my last business and having my wife there and then everything that you've gone through with the growth with Ronawk and everything, having your
Hmm.
husband there and all of that. So
Hmm.
would love to kind of just talk about that and what that journey has been like for you, either in the world of academics and or in just the world of like growing your business.
Hmm. Yeah, so and it's been very interesting. So I come from, an era where a lot of things in the LGBTQ community have changed really rapidly in like the last 12 to 15 years.
Hmm.
But I grew up um, where it wasn't really accepted, and there's certain parts of the country where it's still not accepted very
Right.
well. But for me, um, the reason I bring that up is I spent a good majority of my life pretending to be someone that I wasn't to try to appease others. And while it wasn't maybe that different on the outside, it was a big weight that I think prevented me from being able to put, all my efforts or all my energy into the activities I was doing. And so when I finally came out and was, willing to um, acknowledge who I actually was, um,
Hmm.
there wasn't so much that changed about me per se, except that now I was able to devote more brain energy to all the things I wasn't doing because I didn't have to maintain this um, persona of being the person
Yeah.
that I thought wanted me to be. And so um, in academia, there was a shift. I would just say it was neutral, but some people treated me the same. Some people just maybe shied a little more away. I
Hmm.
wasn't necessarily um, screaming about it or anything, but some of the
Right.
things I was really passionate about is just making sure that I was very active that the lab I would have academically would continue to be diverse. We would accept the best people, and we really celebrated diverse backgrounds. So not just ethnicity, not just sexuality. We
Right.
were looking for more creativity. And when Heather and I started the business, we took that, I think, a step further, and it has served us really well. Where we really talk about we want to get as many diverse opinions as we can, because as we approach different problems, sometimes you need the perspective of someone you're not even thinking about, maybe not even that's a scientist, to help solve a problem. So we've had that where, thanks to an individual that was part of our company, he wasn't even a scientist, and he made an observation that ended up being correct that the scientist verified. But we were too down in our ways, and so it allows us to see multiple perspectives. And so for me, that really has been my unfair advantage, is being more open about it. And then the other part of that is, as you mentioned, is I'd end up meeting now at the time my partner, now my husband, and having someone that was there for me to support and someone I could support. And that was totally life changing. And it's thanks
Mm-hmm.
to my husband. He was one of the big people that pushed. He said, "Hey, you know what? You're more passionate about the business in here. Why don't you go do that? Why, life's too short. So take the risk.
Yeah.
And if it didn't work out," he goes, "you're going to find something else." And just having someone to, you know, reassure that confidence was a really, really big deal. And so I can't say enough about my husband, Bill. He has been phenomenal, always there supportive, always there to joke and lighten the mood. Um, and so that's been good on those. As you know, there's those days with entrepreneurship that are really hard, but just having someone who has a different perspective.
Yeah.
And thanks to that, and thanks to Heather, I feel that we have built a pretty wonderful organization that really celebrates people from different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I really like about it is, not only do we solve problems, but I think it keeps everybody open. We keep learning about different perspectives. And
Yeah.
so we can kind of tune out the noise of the world, and we can get back to remembering that we're all just people at the end of the day, with
Yeah.
families. And, we stay grounded. We formed our own family at the company,
Yeah.
and that's been really important.
Yeah. It is interesting how yours, like, two people are better as one, and like how important that that's, even if it's not a spouse, but having somebody there as an entrepreneur,
Yep.
like even with this podcast, like I was like, like this was like June or July of last year. I'm like, I'm gonna launch a podcast. And my wife's like, no, you're not. And I'm like, yes, I am. She's like, no, 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 no. Like, I'm not saying no, you can't. I'm saying you're not yet, because you like to be unique. And if you just go out and launch a podcast right now, it's gonna be like everybody else's podcast. Like, you need to figure out what's going to make you unique and make your podcast unique. And it took me months and months and months for it to like finally click. And then it was like, it clicked, and I said it to her. She's like, yep, that's it.
Yeah.
And just having like that person or those people who know you and are that support system, like with the last business I had and that closing down, like she was basically the one that like let me push it to the point of like where it was so far pushed already, but
Hmm.
she gave me kind of that grace. And then when it was time, it
Yep.
was time. And then on the flip side, when I went and worked a job for, I think it was just right at 6 months, just shy of 6 months. I was working on your guys' site and a bunch of other sites just started coming out of
Hmm.
the blue. And I was having so much fun doing that, but I hated what I was doing. I loved the company
Hmm.
I worked for, but I just hated the job. And she was the
Hmm.
same person that was like, all right, now it's time to hit the gas. You're gonna leave the job and you're gonna go back and be an entrepreneurship, when just 6 months prior, she was like, you got to close down the business and take a job.
Yep.
So they
Yeah.
can, it can definitely be good for that support system. And then on the aspect of like, diverse thinking and, just having
Hmm.
those diverse backgrounds, like we have a large team, in the Philippines, and like, I have just loved having that like difference in mindset and thinking. And
Hmm.
and there's cultural differences and all that, but I just hired on a appointments setter who's calling businesses to try to set appointments for me and everything like that. And it's new. I've never done it well. That was the job I had
Hmm.
6 months, was trying to set appointments. And we're just like talking through things, and just like the way
Mm-hmm.
she's asking things, because they think of things differently over there,
Yeah.
it's really helped fine tune things and get the ball rolling on things. And so, um, that's one of the things, like when I'm talking with potential clients and everything, I share the fact that like we have a team both here domestically and internationally. And I'm like, and I'm not going to stop at just the Philippines. Like I'd love to find a few other
Mm-hmm.
places that, like for me, like it has to be very well in like English speaking and everything, but that's purely just from a
Mm-hmm.
communication aspect and
Yeah.
um, culture aspect in terms of team culture and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, where can I find other talent? Because it can really help like diversify the way we think as a team, we do things for our clients and all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I can definitely see how that's played a huge role. And then when you and I were talking a couple weeks ago, you even were talking about how it took a play into the branding and everything
Mm-hmm.
for the business and all of that, which was not something that I mean, I've been working with you guys for how long, and I did not even know that till we talked
Yeah.
a few weeks ago. So
Yeah. No, it was a pretty exciting change. So what Brad's referencing in our branding is we rebranded about 2 or 3 years ago, and we our colors used to be blue, black, and gray and white. And when we redid our logo and whatnot, this time we brought in our whole management team to collaborate on it, and we picked some colors. But I remember I was watching, for anyone who has a custom built computer and sees all the fun LED lighting. I was watching one of our computers and it was going through the whole rainbow spectrum. And I just said to our team, I said, you know what? I want to put all the colors in there because our logo is these three intertwining rings. And, I said, I want us to really celebrate the fact that we're looking at everything. And then what we noticed once we added that, it changed actually the appearance of the logo. And we
hmm
noticed that there were hearts in the logo. So it actually made it more binding to the people of our company that, we've built this on. And so, now these three rings are these multiple hearts that are joined together and just celebrating the fact that we have people from literally all walks of life and experiences. And to your point, Brad, like just, someone who has a different upbringing, cultural experience can be a really powerful ally and collaborator. And so we try to cultivate everything at Ronawk so that instead of things, being adversarial, it's all collaborative. It's what's the goal, and let's throw out what are different perspectives of how we get to that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were saying that, I looked over my other monitor and pulled up your website. I'm like, I never even noticed the hearts aspect. You learn
Yep.
something new every day. So I want to
Yeah.
be respectful of your time and everything. I know you're super busy, but I always like to close these
Mm-hmm.
out with if there was kind of anybody who's listening who either has a diverse background in the sense that
Mm-hmm.
either they're LGBT, they're have some sort of diverse background, or
Mm-hmm.
they were in the world of being an academics prior to now they're thinking about going out and pursuing entrepreneurship full time. What's
Mm-hmm.
kind of one word or phrase of advice that you could give to that individual?
Ooh, one word. Um,
Word, advice, phrase, sentence,
um,
whatever.
I, I guess if you're thinking about it, I probably am always going to say go for it.
Yeah.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained. But the thing is, no matter what, even if you do it and it doesn't work out, you're going to come out stronger on the other side because you're going to learn something. And I think if anything from the pandemic, it's taught at least myself and a lot of people I know that life is too short. So, don't be afraid to try something new, take advantage of that opportunity. And like the example you gave of the other individual that was building decks during the pandemic,
hmm
you never know where things are going to lead. So,
Yeah.
just, go for it. If it's not your thing, and try something new. And the other thing is, um, I guess on the flip side of that too, be open, but also always persevere. So, um, it takes a lot of hard work to get there, and with a good support system, you keep your eye on the prize.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard this the other day in one of our sermons at church, that you never know what's on the other side of saying yes to something. So
Yes,
that's exactly what I heard there. So,
yep, that
absolutely.
Great way to sum it up.
Awesome. Well, AJ, thanks again for joining me today. This was a great conversation, and I don't get the chance to catch up with you like I used to. So it's always great when we do have those moments. For anybody who's listening, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review so we can continue to produce more episodes like this. And if you're online using things like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, anything along those lines, please share this episode and tag myself and our guests so we can get more exposure to what they are doing at Ronawk with their BioBlock technology. Until next time, this is your Unfair Advantage.
You've been listening to The Unfair Advantage. We're all human. We all make mistakes. But Brad's mission is to turn those into useful tools. Tools that can propel you forward like you've never imagined. He's not an expert, but he's been in the trenches. He hit rock bottom when his fintech company folded in 18 months, and he was knee-deep in the poor me attitude. But you know what? He bounced back, and now his mission is to help you do the same. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. Visit the website at bradstarnes.fyi. The podcast URL is unfairadvantagepodcast.com. And find Brad on Facebook and LinkedIn at Brad Starnes Official. See you next time on The Unfair Advantage.